All right, we'll go ahead and kick off. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you may be in the world. My name is Sophia Arend, and I'm the Global Blockchain Business Council's Communications and Content Lead. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to the Global Blockchain Business Council and Global Digital Finance's Global Leader Series. This is a weekly global town hall we host with policymakers and business leaders to hear insights into their work, the state of the blockchain and digital asset industry, and current global affairs. Today, we have the pleasure to be joined by Irene Arias Hofman, CEO of IDB Lab and GBBC Ambassador to Spain, and GBBC's Chief Operating Officer, Mercina Tillemann, for a conversation on IDB Lab, which is the innovation laboratory of the Inter-American Development Bank Group, IDB Lab's mission and how they are deploying market-driven solutions to transform the lives of people across Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as Irene's journey to leading IDB Lab. Just briefly before we begin, I'd like to introduce our guest. Irene Arias Hofman is a Spanish national and was appointed CEO of IDB Lab in January 2018. She leads a purpose-driven multidisciplinary team that fosters innovation for inclusion in Latin America and the Caribbean. And under her direction, the lab uses tools of financing, knowledge, and connections to co-create projects and support entrepreneurship. IDB Lab looks for market-driven solutions able to transform the lives of people that are vulnerable due to economic, social, or environmental factors. Previously, she developed her career working for more than 20 years with the World Bank Group, specifically with the IFC, the largest international development institution focused on the private sector. There, Irene had investment responsibilities with global reach and also focused on Latin America and the Caribbean. She managed IFC's largest portfolio of 16 billion US dollars in an annual investment programs of more than 6 billion US dollars. Her focus has been on innovation, venture capital, and fintech. She holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Carlos III University in Madrid and an MA in international relations from Johns Hopkins University and an MA in advanced European studies from the College of Europe. She is also a CFA charter holder. We are so pleased to have her here with us today, and we welcome your questions at any point during today's webinar. You can submit them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll take them throughout. Thank you so much to both of you, and I'll hand things off to Mercina to get us started.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and thank you for being here with us, Irene. It's really a privilege to have you, and I'm excited for the conversation. And to start, for those in the audience who might not be as familiar, and just to frame the rest of our discussion, can you tell us about the mission of the IDB Group and how IDB Lab fits under the larger umbrella of the organization?
Well, thank you, and hello to everyone. Thank you, Martina and Sophia and the GBBC for having me. It's great to be part of this great network. IDB, as the Inter-American Development Bank, is the main provider of development finance in Latin America and the Caribbean. Under the umbrella of the Inter-American Development Bank, there are three parts: the public arm, and they are the main provider of finance to governments in the region; the private arm, IDB Invest, and they provide private financing to corporates, infrastructure projects, and financial institutions; and IDB Lab. IDB Lab's purpose under the umbrella of the group is to be the innovation laboratory, to be that space where we can experiment, take more risk than the other two parts of the group. We can provide financing, connections, and also knowledge, working with one foot in the innovation ecosystem in the region and one at the IDB, and just bringing the best of both worlds together. So our purpose is to use innovation to promote inclusion, to really improve lives of poor and vulnerable population in the region through new ideas, new business models, and taking advantage of the amazing abundance of innovation and also the growth of startups and the acceleration of the digital economy. So finding those future stars that are bringing up these new models. It's an amazing mandate, and I'm really, it's been an honor really to do this job with a team of 100 people who are in all of the 26 countries in which we operate.
Well, and you're doing some incredible work, and I'm excited to get more into the projects a little bit later in the conversation. But before we get there, I'd love to speak a little bit to the idea of innovating within a much larger organization. And because that is your specific mandate, perhaps it's easier, but throughout my career, I've been perennially, I guess, disappointed by how challenging it is to get stakeholders to buy into really new paradigm shifting ideas or technologies. And I'd love to hear about your experience working with all sides of the IDB Group to get buy-in for the work that you want to execute on.
Thanks. And as Sophia said, I did start my career in more of the mainstream finance and working with the corporate and the financial institutions, seeing the world now more through the lens of entrepreneurs. It's a very different perspective, but it's, I think it's never either or, no? And just connecting the two and connecting real needs on the ground with powerful solutions that have not been tested before, and we're having this appetite for risk and this ability to use flexible instruments, more agile, shorter time periods, and working absolutely directly with the innovators, with the entrepreneurs, having presence in a lot of the innovation hubs across the region, helps in terms of, first and foremost, building the right culture inside and within the team, and something that we, it doesn't happen overnight. IDB Lab was previously called Multilateral Investment Fund, MIF. It was created almost 3 decades ago under the umbrella of the IDB. The IDB as a whole has a 60-year history. And it always had MIF, now IDB Lab, a mandate to look for those new frontiers and kind of throw the ball a little further. And that's pretty unique, because having worked at other multilaterals, there is no single institution within the umbrella of these international organizations like IDB Lab that has that purpose, that has that mandate, that focus, that specialization, and the expectation. And I'm really grateful to the 40 countries that fund IDB Lab, and the main shareholder today is Japan, because thanks to them, we have the freedom to operate and be strategically aligned to the rest of the group, but independent enough that we can make decisions through the lens of a team that understands, for example, earlier stage risk, and is able to operate again with kind of one foot in the institution, one foot in the ecosystem. This, I think, is very important and relates very much to also the way and the mission of GBBC itself. No, you have this theme that says developing the next $1 trillion industry through education, advocacy, and partnership. And you are set up as a very open network. It's very much the same way that we operate. And so first and foremost, I think we have that independence. We have a separate governance, and we are expected to do what we do. But it is fairly unique, and it starts with the culture and a very clear conviction of why we are doing this. Now, what we did 3 years ago when we transitioned from MIF to IDB Lab was a process of becoming a lab and becoming this source of air, like in terms of being agile, bringing ideas and taking more risk. And so that involved, again, a lot of developing an innovation culture, being more used to stretch collaboration. Also this idea of organizations being living organisms and becoming very horizontal, very decentralized. The best ideas come from unusual places and mixing very different disciplines. So if you have rigid units and business units with very hierarchical reporting lines, it's not going to flow. Self-initiative is not going to flourish. And so we kind of went through a process of adopting more of the teal organizational principles of self-organized teams and becoming a bit of a team of teams, of X teams, like Deborah Ancona at MIT says. I guess I'm emphasizing a lot the culture and the organizational process, because it is the basis for then a lot of the talent and the ideas to flourish, and the mentality of being open source, been doing things with others, and we'll talk about LACChain later, but I think that is one of the reasons why it's been so successful as the main platform for developing the blockchain ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it started as a small project 2 years ago, and now has 60 partners, more than 30 use cases, delivering impact using this new, not so new technology, but using it with a high rate of adoption. And it's all based on this same principles. So.
There's so many themes in there that I really love: the interdisciplinary nature of what you do and the decentralization. And you mentioned your previous work at the World Bank, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you focused on there and how that equipped you to step into this leadership role at IDB Lab.
Well, I spent 20 years at the IFC. This is the private arm of the World Bank Group. I played different roles, mostly in the financial institutions group, which I ended up leading as the global director for financial institutions. And then also looking at all the sectors, but within one region as director of Latin America and the Caribbean, which was my last role before I got a call from a headhunter and was tempted to make this jump into the IDB and lead the innovation lab. And the work at IFC, I guess, first of all, it allowed me to see the different challenges around the world, because I worked in most of the different regions based in different countries around the world. And the sensitivity about understanding local conditions, so that you don't there's no solution that can be adoption first unless you really understand what's going on the ground. That was quite important. Also, I think IFC was a great institution in terms of developing women leadership. A lot of attention put on that, a lot of programs in terms of mentoring, sponsors, leadership programs that helped me through the career and make these different moves. So that was the second really important element. And the third one was a deep understanding of the corporate and financial world. Because again, now looking at the opportunities through the lens of entrepreneurs and innovators, it's a lot of the times, again, it's not the new versus the old, is how do you integrate these new solutions and scale them either through the public system or through the corporate financial sector, and make the next generation of companies that are gonna take advantage of this massive evolution in new technologies, in data availability and analytics, and also new types of talent. So I think it's helping me a lot in terms of not working in innovation in isolation, but helping integrate it into the rest of the digital economy.
And you spoke about the scope of IDB Labs' mission. And I'm wondering how you choose, within that pretty extensive scope, the projects and the partners with whom you engage.
That's a great question. And again, it's so rapidly changing, and there are so many new actors coming up every day that we, as part of the becoming a lab process, we changed a bit the sourcing model from one which traditionally had been a little bit more closed in based on networks and connections with some of the players and institutions in the region to one where we totally democratize access to IDB Lab. And so more than half of what we finance, either through grants or equity or loans, we have a large equity portfolio, have invested in more than 400 startups. We have backed up more than 90 venture capital funds and done more than 2,000 discovery projects that use grant because we're opening up some new frontier or there is some kind of public good aspect to it. Most of it is now done through open calls, through competitive processes, because that's the best way to be sure that we're really giving a chance to the best innovators in the region and not just the ones that we happen to know are close-knit. So that's, I guess, an invitation to whoever is listening that we are happy to connect. We will continue to make this extra effort to be as open source as we can and to build partnerships with others to take advantage also of these calls that we are doing. For example, we just launched a couple of weeks ago, one for venture capital funds. We got more than 120 fund managers applied from Latin America and the Caribbean. That is pretty much a survey of the entire industry right there. And we are in the process of selecting. So we have the shortlist of the top 50 and going down through the list. But we're sharing that with other partners that are interested in also supporting the growth of the VC industry. So that's the mechanism that's allowing us to be as effective also in the use of our resources and also very importantly to mobilize at scale. And currently, just last year, for every $1 of public financing that we put in, we had 6 from the private sector. So that's a pretty good mobilization ratio, and we want to keep it growing.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal rate. And I'm curious, given your extensive collaboration with the private sector to create opportunities for more vulnerable populations in the LAC region, what's your perspective on developing effective and sustainable partnerships between public and private sector actors in the context of development work?
Great. Now, it's a very important question, goes at the heart of why we're doing what we do. Let's take financial inclusion, for example. I mean, we're at a point where Latin America is facing like the worst crisis in the last 150 years. On top of it, in many of the countries, a climate crisis with hurricanes like Eta and Iota in Central America. On top of it, a migration crisis, particularly with the Venezuelan migration that has received the least support in all of the migration crises in the world. And COVID, of course, is still affecting Latin America and the Caribbean more than any other region per capita. Like 1/4 of the deaths from COVID are from Latin America and the Caribbean, and it's only 10% of the global population. So against that landscape, one of the things that happened through the pandemic was some countries were able to react to provide some support to unbanked population, people that did not have any kind of lifeline and had lost their jobs and so on. So social transfers became massive, like more than 5 million new people opened digital bank accounts in Colombia to receive those transfers, more than 15 million in Brazil. So there were a few things that happened through this crisis that could be incredible levers for accelerating financial inclusion if you, based on that, then start building a more of an economic passport for those individuals that now had for the first time from zero to now having not just a bank account, but a digital bank account, but being able to go beyond just receiving that transfer and using it as a one-off. So we are very focused, for example, on doing that now and creating the ability also with blockchain of having a more massive adoption of digital wallets, of the ability of people to have self-sovereign digital ID, to have digital credentials that they can store and they can elect and having it in a way that is, in a trusted network, also fully compliant with all the privacy requirements and so on, and being able to kind of go to that next level of financial inclusion. So we are hoping that if we work in a systematic way with all the different actors, and again, this is not just disrupting the old and working only, for example, with a fintech. It's plus a lot of the fintechs are not necessarily tackling deeply enough the financial inclusion problem. So it's working with different business models and bringing also even the regulators to the table to create the system that can help us use these events to trigger further financial inclusion and say, okay, from here in the next 5 years, every single person in Latin America and the Caribbean that was unbanked will have a digital bank account, will have a digital wallet, and will be able to access finance. So those are the types of challenges that we're focused on, but we're doing it through this work across the public side, banks, the financial system, and the new models, not just the fintechs, also digital job platforms, a lot of companies that are storing a lot of data on customers that are outside the system and can now use data-driven models to on-lend or provide other types of financial services to underserved population.
We have a lot of questions coming in, which is great. But before we get to those, I'd be grateful if you can speak to LACChain and the motivation for engaging on this huge project, kind of what it is, and we can get to where it is now. But I think that would be helpful, especially given so many of the questions are about LACChain.
So first of all, we recognized 2.5 years ago that Latin America and the Caribbean was a suitable region to help roll out blockchain-based solutions, again, as a way to, for example, bridge the financial inclusion gap. Why? Because we felt the digital transformation process in which many countries were involved, and also the need to renew legacy system, the search for technology tools to leapfrog in many countries. For example, in the Caribbean, a lot of the governments are very focused on this digital transformation agenda. Made it a really good place to explore using blockchain to enable a lot of new solutions. So we also we started by testing some of these solutions. So we did in Bahamas, digitizing education credentials, or in the Southern Cone project with the World Economic Forum in terms of digitizing customs and so on. So we had many use cases by year one, but we felt, okay, what's next? How do we then go from these individual use cases to a system, to a public good that is going to be able to create this sort of highway for everyone to use it, and everyone to be able to layer on it their use cases. So we embarked in an alliance, but what we discussed earlier in terms of the principles of how we think and how we work. We think in terms of systems, and we think in an open, collaborative way. And we were able to bring what today are 60 of the most promising and amazing leading partners in blockchain in the world, each with their own capabilities, strengths, specialization, whether it's in bond issuance or in recording of property records, or different aspects of it, or on cross-border payments, and working as a consortia with seed capital that IDB Lab provided and helped kickstart this effort. Now what we have is an open network that is free, and where any partner can come and use and build their use cases on it. So it's having the foundation the right foundation, the common protocols, so that anybody can then, with a much lower transaction cost and less friction and less having to individually learn by doing, and having a common model. It's a publicly permissioned infrastructure, enabled a lot of the solutions to happen in a decentralized way. And what we have now are e-health solutions, e-law, e-justice, e-registry, e-voting, many things. Even now, having seen the dramatic impact of COVID in the region, we are doing a pilot on issuing digital vaccination credentials that can be verified with high levels of assurance at any place, and also the traceability of the distribution of vaccines. So in some ways, I know that a lot of you who are listening today are probably already convinced of the value of blockchain, but I think it's important to say we did this not thinking that blockchain is a solution to every problem, but thinking that it's a tool to unlock value. It's the Internet of value, and that through this global alliance, where different partners that have something to add sign an MOU with us, become part of it, and deliver value that makes the sum of the parts so much greater, we now have this regional blockchain infrastructure. I could go on for hours, so I'm going to stop there.
Well, I mean, the value of having that shared digital public good is just tremendously exciting. And you mentioned digital health credentials. What are some of the other applications that are running on LACChain currently?
And from digitizing property records, for example, in Argentina, in one of the poorest neighborhoods, a project called DIDI with IDB Labs, we are creating property records on blockchain for people that didn't have a property record in their lives. If you read Hernando de Soto back then, this is the same principles, but brought forward with the current technology. Also, in terms of facilitating cross-border payments, facilitating trade, I mentioned the project Cadena. This is for customs, so facilitating and making much more reliable and efficient. Surprisingly, the country that has most use cases is Peru. And they range, and they include also in education, they include a lot of use cases on supply chain. So for verification and traceability of product, of the origin of products and the components. And again, this is very important because of a lot of the smallholder producers in the region. We've used that in different parts of Central America, like for cocoa producers, and smallholders are getting a lot more value for their product thanks to this. We're very excited about the opportunities that we have now working also with Citi in terms of the layer of cross-border payments, and we've run also use cases in terms of tokenized assets, and being able to even apply a lot of these to procurement inside our own institutions, and our sister organizations, the World Bank, is using it as well. In the region, a lot of the leading development banks in the region within the countries, like BNDES in Brazil, is deploying it as well for their own use cases in Brazil. So I would say that there are, for those interested in this LACChain.net, you can see more of about a lot of the 30+ use cases that I've just mentioned. Also, who are these 60 public and private institutions that are already in the network, and the 12 countries that are most active in it.
Excellent. And You've spoken a little bit to the challenge and your mechanisms for engaging the public sector. So many of these use cases that you mentioned require engagement at a very, very local level. And I'm wondering what kind of education and outreach efforts IDB Lab utilizes in order to capture truly the most vulnerable who need to participate in these different projects for them to be valuable in the way that you're intending.
Thanks. I'll get to that question. I did want to mention one more thing about how this open infrastructure has been set up in terms of being agnostic to a specific technology, so that we don't know in the end, just like when the internet happened, which one is going to prevail. So in that sense, it's an interoperable system that is agnostic to any specific one, and some of the partners that you will see there include multiple all of the available providers today, leading providers in the world, like Consensus. In the region, one very important achievement recently was to now work hand in hand with Red Clara and the Casa de Internet, so out of Uruguay. And I think this is going to be really, really important in terms of the long-term sustainability of LACChain, and having basically ownership in the region itself. And that takes me to this question that you just asked, because the design of what we do and this type of working on these new frontiers, we always try to do it with first of all, with the users in mind. Design the solutions with the users, and also involve local institutions that ensure that we're going to have a lasting impact, and it's not going to depend on us, or it's gonna be able to grow independently. I'll maybe a couple of examples. One is on gender, and one is on the silver economy. So in terms of the poor and vulnerable population in Latin America and the Caribbean, one of the groups that have suffered most and doubled during the pandemic are women, partly because we've seen the loss of more than 30 million jobs in the region, and the majority of these were held by women. And also they were digitally less included, and so they were less ready to be able to take advantage of this acceleration of new opportunities and new business models. So we're working really hard to, and we've been doing that for more than 15 years, but to promote women-led startups in STEM, and also talent, women that really want to get into the STEM fields and learn tech skills and soft skills that prepare them for this, for what the future is going to demand. And for the first one, for women-led startups in STEM, we have a platform called LACChain, LACChain.co. It's an amazing platform because it's been connecting for over 12 years women in STEM with mentors, with investors, and ourselves. We also sit side by side with other fund managers, the leading fund managers in the region every year, and we have a pitch competition and we select the next cohort. And now you have like a full intra-generational a network of support of women who now invested in unicorns, and women from, for example, a couple of years ago, a couple of women from out in Chocó in Colombia, first time that they left their hometown and they came to the pitch competition in Paraguay, and it really kind of changed completely their perspective. So that's one amazing platform, and the way we're trying to kind of extend the benefit and the reach of what we do, and putting it at the service of all of the other investors and companies that are looking to address the same challenge. The example of silver economies, because often the region is so swamped with the current emergencies that it's hard not to see, or it's easy not to see an impending emergency, and that is the fact that Latin America and the Caribbean has the fastest aging population in the world. And which is at the same time an opportunity. It could be a great source of demand for future services in terms of health and other things from the elderly population. So we did a design workshop in Uruguay with all the different players that understand the different angles around this potential challenge and opportunity. And now we have, yesterday we signed a project with Endeavor and Seniors, a company led by one of a very well-known tech entrepreneur in Uruguay. And it's going to go deeper into what's the landscape and do a challenge to look for the best solutions in terms of providing services for the elderly, and also incorporate them into the modern sort of job world with upskilling and so on. Those I hope they're useful examples of how we approach it. I think the common themes in all of it is that we don't do it alone. We have a method and a process, and typically it ends up also with an open challenge or a curated challenge, but that gives opportunity to the best ideas, for the best ideas to emerge, and then either we fund them or partly, or mobilize from others and share also that pipeline with others that can independently fund it. And we are seeing increasing interest from many partners that were not that used to co-fund these type of initiatives in emerging markets, like Google and many others who are now co-financing a lot of these activities with us.
That's really helpful and interesting to understand. And it's interesting to see kind of increased need highlighted by COVID in the region. One of the questions we received was about whether COVID has accelerated the adoption of the LACChain platform. And as you've seen these different pieces of infrastructure stretched to their limits, if there seems to be increased openness to the idea of the types of innovation you're working to promote in the region.
Definitely yes. Definitely yes, because just for example, in terms of payment systems, there has been an accelerated need to one, open digital accounts, to enable even small businesses to go through their own digital transformation and have digital payment methods. So even if people are still going to pay in a store, do it in a contactless way. So all of that has created a huge surge of demand for digital infrastructure and digital payments. Also, of course, for the basic foundations in terms of connectivity and so on, which we are also working on separately in terms of providing through new models this last mile connectivity. So we've seen an incredible acceleration in all of that, and a lot of the companies that are at the forefront of providing and helping some of the traditional companies with this transformation have also seen that benefit. So for example, a company called Novo Payment, which helps new companies or traditional financial institutions develop their digital banking capabilities, has seen a huge surge. But I think we've seen it across the different verticals that I mentioned earlier, which supported a lot of the health tech solutions, which are now becoming references in the region, in dealing with the emergency health needs. So from this is not necessarily related to blockchain, but other types of using AI and big data for delivery of better care. And we've seen the success of a lot of the companies that we very, very early on invested in, like Neuralmed in Brazil, that recently got awarded and is growing very rapidly. I want to also recognize again the value of partnerships, because what I think based on this increased interest and demand and this momentum that we see, a lot more of the most relevant partners are coming together under the LACChain Alliance, and I'm of course Alastria was our inspiration to do LACChain, and they were there from the beginning, as well as Everest and NTT Data. But more recently, Iberclear, Inatpa, Garrigues, Red Clara, and many others that I think are going to be able to create unprecedented value to the network.
Another question that we've received is about whether the model of LACChain is being used in other parts of the world, or whether there's any plan to promote use of that model in other regions.
Yes, it's been used in other parts, both through network institutions like the World Bank itself, the African Development Bank, and others. So in terms of both their own use cases inside the institution, like in procurement, using blockchain for their own procurement processes, as well as in terms of specific projects on the ground. So we're seeing that this is our focus as IDB Lab is, of course, to multiply the use cases in Latin America and the Caribbean, but the same, and having been recognized worldwide by E2 as a leading reference infrastructure, blockchain infrastructure, it's been picked up by others in other parts of the world, and that is what it's there for. And so if it can be a public good that benefits other parts of the world as well, then that's really great news for everyone. And so we're very, very happy to see that traction.
Absolutely. Switching gears slightly, on an individual level, what advice would you give to someone who was interested in getting involved at the intersection of development work and emerging technology?
First, get to understand well the challenges to be solved, and be very clear also on why do it in the first place. No, and I think being very clear about the motivation for why doing it is very, very important. Sometimes we see companies in the tech space that are overwhelmingly offering their solutions, but it's in the region, but it tends to be a bit of a hammer looking for a nail, and then the adoption is not there. So I think starting from a deep understanding of what the challenges are and why, and what's your motivation, what's your driver for addressing that, and your passion in terms of like closing those gaps. It's much more important than understanding everything, the ins and outs of the technology itself. But I think for people that can combine the two, if you have a very strong tech background, an understanding of what business models work and don't, and a good hold of what's the reality on the ground, the demand is exponential. So you're gonna see many opportunities. I think then the question is whether you want to follow more of an entrepreneurial path, or you want to work within an institution that can have larger impact, but where you have to work within the environment of that institution. And in that sense, I feel that at IDB Lab we're quite privileged, because we have a bit of the best of both worlds in that sense. We work closer than I ever did in my 25 years of experience in this space to the entrepreneurs and the action. So I think, but understanding also kind of from where you want to lead that impact and choosing that path. Ideally, I mean, some of our best colleagues have been entrepreneurs before, and so it's always great to have that connection and people who come and go from one side to the other.
Absolutely. So shifting gears again slightly, you are a Spanish national and a GBBC ambassador to Spain, for which we're very grateful. Can you tell us a bit about the blockchain and innovation landscape in Spain and how this ties into and relates to your work at IDB?
Thanks. So we follow it very closely, first because there are natural ties between the innovation ecosystem in Spain and Latin America and the Caribbean. There are not just the Cabifys of this world, but there are many companies that are going from one market to the other, or vice versa. A lot of great entrepreneurs that are working across those geographies. So there are natural links there, as there are in the corporate and financial world as well. We also were very privileged to have access to all the work and the learnings of the key partners in Alastria when we first started LACChain. So their openness and generosity with sort of helping take that into the Latin American space was amazing. And then there are also at the institutional level a lot of synergies as well. So not just with the European blockchain infrastructure, but also at the level of Spain and the effort that Spain is doing in terms of digital rights, with the World Mobile Congress, and also the efforts in terms of responsible use of AI and data. There are many cross-cutting initiatives that we're doing that start from some of the similar principles of what kind of society do we want to have, and that balance between that we need to reach between sort of bottom up and top down, sort of to allow for a lot of the data-driven companies to flourish. So there are, I think, at the entrepreneurial level, financial sector and corporate, institutional level, and even in terms of this area of standard setting, a lot of commonalities and a lot of bridges already. So it's taking me back home almost every day.
That's wonderful, and just mindful of time, but perhaps we can do one more question. We spoke a little bit before the conversation got started formally about how things are beginning to get back to normal. More and more individuals are getting vaccinated. Travel is becoming a little bit safer. And yet there are certain things about the last year that have been really good for the planet. Maybe a reduction in the emission of fossil fuels and a slowing down of pace and increasing connectivity with populations who aren't always included in important conversations because of their inability to travel to different places. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, looking forward, the next 6 months, the next year, what advice you can give to help us build a world which is not just what we had 14 months ago, but which improves on all of the things that we've learned and makes a more kind of sustainable future moving forward.
Thanks, Marcina. I did share that I traveled for the first time in 14 months, not just travel, but literally left my zip code for the first time in 14 months a few weeks ago when I traveled for IDB's annual meeting to Barranquilla. The city welcomed us with open arms, and we were all, of course, following strict protocol and being very careful, and everything went really well. And it felt extremely normal. And I think we need to value those moments, and we need to make sure that we maintain a balance of being very efficient, not going back to a lot of the unnecessary trouble, which in the end absorbs a lot of unnecessary resources and time, and dedicate that to fund more projects instead, no? And give more opportunities to people to do real things. So being quite mindful about balancing out the trouble, but maintaining enough of that those important connections and those bonding moments that can help generate trust, because a lot of the things that we discussed over the last hour, they involve high levels of trust. And when we get into this new economy, new digital economy, new systems, there are certain things that are paramount, like interoperability, like common standards, and so on. And that requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of trust, and so having some moments where you actually can have meaningful, important in-person connections that can move the needle in that sense, great. Otherwise, keep a really good balance. It helped us certainly a lot as the most decentralized team at the IDB to be able to have everybody on a level playing field, everybody in the field feeling as connected to our headquarters in Washington, D.C. as anyone else. We don't want to lose that. So maintaining the ability to follow everything from wherever you are, and that level of flexibility, we've seen that it's also made everybody have a better balance as well in terms of how they, from many points of view, including for the most part in terms of families. But it has been tough, and it's been really unequal, and we really suffer from seeing a lot of the disparity that this has created in the region, because there are only a few percentage that has been able to navigate this crisis with remote work, with all these levels of connectivity and opportunity. So we want to also be very, very mindful of that. And that's why our purpose in terms of delivering inclusion through innovation and accelerating access and inclusion in terms of technological access, it's like 100 times, our determination 100 times bigger even than it was before the pandemic. So that's the stuff that we need to do more of. The stuff that we need to keep is that balance between virtual access and a few in person, and And I think that should be very much on our mind so that we don't just go back by default to how things were.
That is a really valuable call to action. And I'm so grateful for the last hour you've taken to spend with us. Thank you so much. And Sophia, I will pass things back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Irene and Mercina. It was an absolute privilege to have you both on with us today. For everyone who tuned in, we will share a recording of this conversation on GBBC's YouTube, as well as links to learn more about IDB Lab and LACChain. We hope you'll join us next Tuesday for a conversation with Andy Baldwin, Global Managing Partner of Client Services at Ernst & Young, and Lawrence Wintermeyer, Executive Co-Chair of Global Digital Finance. Thank you again, Irene and Mercina, and to all of you for your insightful questions. We look forward to future conversations. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, everyone.